A quick note before we get into it today. If you are not familiar with Seth Vore and the journey he is on with his family on a boat, you'll want to go back and listen to episode 110 and 112. We first met Seth in December of 2021 and then checked in with him again in June of 2022. And now we're checking in with him as he's got about 1,000 miles left on the year-long boat journey that he's doing with his family. So if you want a little more context, go listen to those first. One other encouragement as you're listening to Seth share all the interesting things that he does. Think of what you might want to do. Think of who you might be in the face of the challenges that Seth faces and the unexpected pleasures that he experiences. What might you want those things to be for you? And how might there be parallel experiences in your own life right now that you might want to reflect on as you hear what's going on with Seth? Well, today Captain Seth joins us again. It's been since June of 2022 since we last heard his voice, and I have no idea what he's been up to. So, Captain Seth, are you out there?
I am. Thank you so much, John. I'm looking forward to catching up and sharing some of our journey with you.
Yeah, so where in the world are you?
Today we find ourselves right at the Chesapeake Bay, where the Potomac River dumps into the Chesapeake Bay.
Okay. I don't know my geography very well out there. Potomac, Washington, D.C.?
Yep. So we just got back from Washington, D.C. So we're heading up the East Coast, and we pulled up the Potomac River. It takes about 2 days to motor up the Potomac to Washington, D.C. We spent 4 nights there and toured Washington, D.C., and then 2 days back down the Potomac River, and now we're right at the mouth where we're going to enter the Chesapeake and take a left turn and head further north up the East Coast here.
All right, so you'll be back on the Atlantic Ocean.
Yep.
So, is there a short... It's funny. I've had at least 2 people say, "What's going on with Captain Seth? Where is he?" And I said, I don't know. And then I think you and I tried to make contact a couple months ago when you were playing in the Bahamas.
Exactly.
And
so let me just summarize what the trip is, and then we'll hone in on where we are in the trip. So like you said, last time we talked was June, which is crazy that was almost a year ago, and we had not really left our home port or where we purchased the boat. And so we've been on this grand adventure called the Great Loop. It's a 6,000-mile boat trip. We got started in St. Louis, Missouri, but we headed north first, which is not how you normally do this loop. And we did that for a couple of reasons. One was weather, and one was we wanted to learn our boat on Lake Michigan in the summertime when it's beautiful on Lake Michigan. And so we headed north first. We made it as far north up Lake Michigan to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan at Mackinac Island. And then we turned around, and then we've been on this great loop ever since. So we came down Lake Michigan, down the Mississippi River, a section of the Ohio River, and then this waterway called the Tennessee Tombigbee Waterway. And that dumps you out in the Gulf of Mexico right at Mobile, Alabama. We spent some time in Alabama and then across the panhandle of Florida. We had a big overnight crossing of the Gulf of Mexico to get us from the panhandle of Florida to kind of the west side of Florida. We marched down the west coast of Florida. We spent some time in the Florida Keys, Key West, and the Keys Islands, and then up to Key Largo, where, like you mentioned, we went over to the Bahamas. And so that was a whole adventure of itself. We spent a month over in the Bahamas. We came back from the Bahamas about 7 weeks ago, and we've been on our journey up the east coast of the U.S. since then. So Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, and now we've done up the Potomac River, back down. From here, we'll continue north on the Atlantic side of the U.S., up the Chesapeake Bay. We'll round New Jersey and into New York Harbor, where we're past Lady Liberty. We'll go up the Hudson River, take a left at the Erie Canal, and then there's a little Oswego Canal that gets us into Lake Ontario. We'll spend some time in Canada this summer, and then complete our trip, or what they call cross your wake, is where you complete your loop, and we'll do that in Mackinac Island on the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and we're looking for about mid-August to do that. So we're about 3 months away from completing our loop and being done with this great loop trip.
So how many miles are left of the 6,000?
We should be about 1,000 left. Yeah, maybe 1,500. Yep.
Amazing. And you said there was an overnight, something in the Gulf of Mexico, Florida. Like, what was special about overnight?
So it's it's the longest single day number of miles that you need to go on this trip. And it's from Carabel, Florida to Tarpon Springs, Florida. And the reason that you need to do it, that you can do it in a daytime if you have a boat that goes fast, or a boat that goes fast that you can afford to burn as much fuel as that takes to do in a single day. The trick is you need to time it for good weather conditions. And so we waited 17 days on the panhandle of Florida waiting for those good weather conditions.
Wow.
To be able to get the ideal time to be able to cross. And boy, did we time it. It was absolutely amazing. You can't get better conditions than what we had. Absolutely flat water. There was a full moon, so we got to see a beautiful, beautiful sunset as we were entering the Gulf of Mexico, and then we saw the full moon rise up, and we were never in darkness really all night long because we could see the horizon with the full moon. We had beautiful calm waters. It got a little bit rough, maybe 3 or 4 in the morning, but nothing really to complain about compared to what the conditions normally are out there. And then you want to time it so that you arrive on the west coast of Florida with the sun fairly high in the sky. So you don't want to be looking directly east into the sunrise as you're trying to arrive, because people do crab fishing off the coast there. And so there are all these crab floats that are out there with lines on them and steel cages at the bottom of the water. And so if you wrap one of those around your propeller, you're dead in the water, and it's not a great situation. So you got to make sure that you can see those. And so, yeah, we spent a 22-hour day. We left at 3 in the afternoon to make this happen. We saw that beautiful sunset, moonrise, and then arrived with the sun high enough that we weren't blinded looking for those crab pots. And thankfully, knock on wood, we have not had any encounters with any of those getting wrapped around our propeller on the entire trip. So,
now, what if you did?
Well, you can snorkel down there and see if you can unwrap it yourself. That depends on the conditions and the clarity of the water and things like that. We have, thankfully, 2 engines aboard, so you can limp in on one if you just have one propeller that's affected. And then usually boat yards will be able to either send a diver down to take care of the situation, or use a boat lift that gets you up and out of the water and on shore, and then they can figure out what's wrong and unwrap it. In the easiest case, it's just unwrap it. In the worst case, you probably have some kind of damage there, bent propeller or a shaft that wobbles or something like that. And so, but there are very many capable boat yards, and you're never far from one on this trip. It's one of the things that's pretty appealing about it, is that you're near a lot of coastal cities that are very well equipped to handle boaters. And so that's probably the longest crossing that we've had, where we were just out of touch with any boatyard whatsoever. But on either end, there's lots to be able to help you.
So how far offshore are you? Like, what's the furthest you're offshore at any given time?
That, I think we were probably maybe 50 miles from land at any given time. 50 to 100, I think, is probably the maximum we'd ever been offshore. And it's really, other than that one, and then the crossing to the Bahamas, that is a big other kind of ocean crossing. Other than that, you're doing short hops in protected waters for the duration of this trip. And so those are the big kind of notable crossing ones. But for most of the days that we've been out here, they've been, about 40-mile day, which takes us, 5 or 6 hours, and in pretty calm waters.
So when you're that far offshore, that sounds a little scary to me. Is it to you?
It's not. I think my wife is a little more scared of it. There's kind of two approaches. When we were crossing the Gulf, we were with 10 other boats, and so there's some safety and community, but there's also some wild cards there, right? Somebody could have a mechanical breakdown that changes everybody's plans in the middle of the night. Somebody could decide that they want to go faster or slower, or get out there and decide they're going to change a plan. And so getting 10 boat captains to agree on exactly what we're going to do for 22 hours is sometimes a difficult thing to do. But so there's certainly opportunities to buddy boat with one or more other boats. If having that community nearby you can always see another boat and have it within sight. When we crossed over to the Bahamas, we did not have that situation. We went solo, but there were a lot of boats out there, so not maybe within eyesight, but certainly within radio calling distance if we needed some kind of assistance out there. So I find peace in being out there alone and not having any schedule or time pressures or anything with a group of boats that may have a different idea of what they want to do than I do. But there's certainly boaters that like to team up and go as a group, and that's totally fine too.
Now, were you affected by any of the hurricanes in Florida?
Not directly. We were still on the rivers when Hurricane Ian hit, but we had reservations for staying at the marina there in Fort Myers, where the bulk of the damage from Hurricane Ian was done. And so that changed some of our west coast of Florida plans. That's one of those reasons we stayed as long as we did in the Panhandle for 17 days waiting on that crossing, is we really had nowhere to be. And so we just enjoyed some of the community of the folks that were in that part of the world at that time too, and were scratching their heads about what their boat cruising plans really looked like. We did have an opportunity to tour that marina after the hurricane, and it was just devastating. A lot of liveaboards that, it's not just their boat, it's their home. And it's just the whole community completely wiped out and affected by it. And so there's still a lot of, angst and healing that is going on, and boat shopping and wondering about. It was a very popular destination on this trip that is just no more. I'm sure they'll rebuild and it'll come back, but it's going to be some time. And so, no, we weren't directly affected by the hurricane like the storm, but certainly we're in the aftermath of it.
What's been the scariest, closest call?
Oh, that's a good question. I think so. Early in our trip, we were probably 2 months in. We were in Michigan, coming back down Lake Michigan. So this puts us in probably August, September timeframe. There was a storm. We were anchored not in the main Lake Michigan, but in a lake off of Lake Michigan that's tied in. And a storm kicked up, and we were anchored with 2 other boats. And our anchor held just fine. We didn't have any issues. We had about 40 miles an hour winds. And so it was impressive, the fierceness of the storm. And being from the Pacific Northwest, we don't get thunder and lightning much. And so our kids are not really used to that. And so our approach, and this happened right kind of in the evening as the sun was setting. So we made hot cocoa. We were sitting out on the covered aft deck of our boat, just watching this powerful storm roll in and listening to the thunder and looking at the flashes of the lightning. And there was a sailboat that was in that moorage that had dropped anchor near us. And almost as soon as the wind picked up, their anchor started to drag, and they started heading for these rocks. and unfortunately the captain had a medical emergency. He went to start his engine to get out of that situation and fell into his engine and cut his arm badly on his fan belt. And so
Whoa.
not only is he completely out of control, dragging his anchor, being blown by the wind towards rocks, now he has an injury. But they did have their engine started, so they did have the ability to move, but they didn't have the ability to pull up their anchor because he didn't have the strength to do it with his injured arm, and his wife was aboard and she didn't have the strength to pull it. So they were trying to head away from us, away to deeper water, and their anchor kept kind of catching on the bottom in certain places, and they were moving erratically. And so in one of those movements, they crashed into us and poked a hole in the side of our boat. And so,
Oh.
it was scary from a lot of standpoints. I mean, the storm itself was scary. The situation for him was scary, and we were concerned for him and trying to figure out, how can we help? What can we do? And then to be struck by his boat was also scary. The Coast Guard ended up getting called, and they dispatched all kinds of rescue efforts to him. The Coast Guard showed up, fireboats, police boats, and then a whole land-based thing.
Oh
But
my
he
gosh.
got transported pretty rapidly to the hospital, and then they transported his wife and two dogs off of the boat, and they got the boat safely anchored a little bit away from us, and so it was empty, but anchored safely for the rest of the storm and the night. And when he hit us, I thought, because we're a pretty big boat and he was a pretty small boat, and we felt it, but it's not like it knocked us over or anything like that. And I thought, well, there'll be a scratch in the morning, and we'll just sort this out separately. I mean, this guy's got potentially life-threatening injuries over there, and I don't need to add to any of that by filing a police report or anything of that. It just didn't even cross my mind. And so then the next morning I get up and I look at the situation, and we had been struck pretty hard. So we had an 8-inch hole poked in the side of the boat, well above the waterline. So we're in no danger of sinking or anything like that. But it was a big hole and a big deal. And there were so many different jurisdictions that had responded. Nobody had written a report for any kind of property damage. It was just a medical response and a transport response. There was no consideration of any kind of other complications. So it wasn't just a matter of, okay, we've seen insurance information, and they asked for the police report, and they have one, and might do that. So it was kind of starting over, and we went through that whole process, which kept us in Michigan on that lake for a little while while we sorted all of those kinds of things out. But yeah, it was a scary, certainly memorable event. But ultimately, it ended up working out. In the fall, in Lake Michigan, they start pulling boats out of the water to go store them for winter, and so no boatyard was equipped to be able to handle a job of that size that late in the season. And so what we ended up doing is temporarily patching the hole in a boatyard there, having all the insurance inspections and things done there, and then waiting until we made it all the way down the rivers to the Gulf of Mexico in Alabama, and having a competent yard there, pull the boat out of the water, do the work to fix it, and put it back in the water. So it certainly affected some of our schedule, and we had a big ugly hole in the side of our boat for a good portion of the trip. But we're very thankful that we were safe, that he got stitched up, and he's in good shape, and we got out of that situation. But that is probably the scariest moment that we've had, for sure.
Whoa. What's been the most surprisingly positive moment?
There have been so many small ones, I think. Just this week, cruising into Washington, D.C. on the Potomac River, it just, like, I have never been to Washington, D.C., so I don't know what it's like to really fly in and see the Capitol or the Washington Monument by air or drive in. But to be coming in under our own power on our own boat and see those massive, iconic monuments, it just kind of melted my heart. And there've been some of those things where or where we accomplish something as a family, as a team on this boat, like one of these big crossings of the Gulf, or the to get over to the Bahamas, that big crossing, where it's an achievement. It's a moment, and it's something that we all share, that is one of those big positives, big joys, and they surprise you, because I think it's hard to wrap your head exactly around, like, oh yeah, great, we're pulling into the sea. We kind of can intellectualize what that is going to be like, but the feels that you feel when that happens are incredible. And when we pull together as a team on the boat to make something like an overnight crossing, or a long day, or fighting rougher seas than we would prefer. Those are the surprising times where you wouldn't think this is going to be one of our better days on this trip, but it turns out to be, just because of the circumstances that we've all experienced together.
If you want to create a really bad day, how would you plan that?
Bad days tend to,
like, what's a really bad day on the boat?
Yeah, bad days. Well, we all have mental health days, mental health issue days, where for whatever reason, and we take turns, in no scheduled
having mental health days.
Yes. And we've all had them, because boat life will do that to you. Living in a smallish box for a year together, away from home and friends, and maybe some of your self-care routines and things like that can catch up to you. And so we try our best to take care of each other, but there's somebody usually in a funk about every other day. And so what makes a bad day out here is
interesting,
something like that, where you're already not starting at 100%, and then throw any other variable. It could be weather. It could be a marina that you thought you had a spot, but the reservation got canceled. Or you thought this was going to be the sweetest, coolest anchorage ever, and you get there and it's packed full of boats. Or you thought it was going to be nice and calm in there, but then you get in there and there's lots of waves, and it's going to be a less than restful night of sleep. And so, so it's a combination, I'd say, of somebody just being in a mood, and sometimes we can put our finger on, why the mood, like, oh, you know what, I miss my friends today, or, oh, you know what, I miss whatever from home today. But then sometimes we can't put our finger on it. It just, I'm just in a bad mood today, and I don't know why. And I think that happens more often than we know within the boat. And
do you have a special system, like, or way of telling each other, hey, I'm having one of those days?
No. We usually discover it by accident, or step in it just by accidentally saying something wrong, or just having it go sideways. I will say there's one thing that has helped greatly, at least for Jennifer and I, is we have these headsets that we use to communicate to each other. So I drive the boat, and Jennifer handles the lines and the bumpers, and so that we don't bump into things, and she handles the anchor and the anchor chain and things like that. But this is a 50-foot long boat, and so we're 30 feet away from each other, and sometimes within line of sight and sometimes not. And so to be able to accurately communicate the situation, like, hey, can you go forward a little bit more? Can you go back? We're going to bump. We're going to this, or even say, hey, we're going to tie up on this side of the boat, but then last minute we changed. We're going to tie up on the other side of the boat. To be able to communicate those without having to raise your voice to get the actual audio communicated to the other person. So we have these headsets that allow you to talk in this conversational voice rather than just raising your voice to yell. I'm not yelling because I'm mad or you're doing something wrong. I'm yelling so you can hear me, but you're interpreting that as I'm doing something wrong somehow, or whatnot. And so those headsets have really been lifesavers. They're actually nicknamed marriage savers on this trip, and I will say that they're worth every penny.
Now, I remember you mentioning that in our last conversation, and also that you were going to have a captain come, like, live with you for 5 days and coach you and kind of show you what to do. What were some of the biggest things you learned there that were surprising?
Yeah, that was a wonderful experience. He came aboard. He spent 5 days with us, and it was, I think, more than anything else, he built our confidence in ourselves. So there wasn't any aha moment of any technical thing that he taught us that we didn't know before he stepped foot on our boat, but he gave us the confidence to drive this boat uh, with the skills that we already had, and give us that confidence that we're not going to crash it into the first lock or the first bridge that we come to. And that was life changing. He worked really, really well with our family in just all of the family dynamics. It's weird when, it's one thing if you have a house guest at a home. To have a boat guest, it's small quarters, and so they really need to gel with the family, and he really did. And so he worked with all of us in all of the different roles that there are on a boat to build our confidence in those. And so that was really good. And he covered all the things. So anchoring, docking, locking. We had to fuel up. We had to call marinas and get reservations, and all of those basic kinds of things that we now do every single day and sometimes take for granted. But he got us confident in doing all of those things, and so I think that really got us on a really firm foundation so that we could focus on other things of the trip rather than be very tentative and worried about those first weeks on the boat.
You mentioned being in a funk. What is it that you personally miss the most about home?
I'll come into a lot. I miss some of the familiarity, right? Every single day here is different and new, and that is exciting and thrilling in some ways. But sometimes you just want to go to your favorite restaurant and have your favorite food and drink your favorite pint of beer and not have to guess, like, is this going to be a good IPA or is this going to be like some terrible experience I'm going to have? Is this a really great burger or is this not? Where do I go? How do I park? What do I do? Every single day, you're always doing something new and different, and sometimes I hunger for just the familiarity. I miss, I just miss the Pacific Northwest sometimes. I really, particularly this time of year, those very first boat rides of the Portland spring season, when you've been pent up inside all winter and it's been gray and drizzly. I really just that joy you feel when you finally the sun comes out and you can get outside and like for me especially getting on the water. Now I don't have anything to complain about. I've been on beautiful sun-filled days on water for a whole year, but that kind of stuff, right? The normal cadence of life in a place that's familiar to you, the seasons changing and knowing what those are and what to expect, sometimes is what I hunger for. And of course the people. I mean, I miss my close friends and seeing them and having those interactions too. But we've made a lot of really great new friends on this trip. And I'm a big introvert, and everybody always says this trip you'll never forget the people. It's about the people that you meet. And when I heard that, I thought that may be true for everybody but me. I'm not sure about that. I'm gonna I'm not real sure. But they were absolutely right. Even for me, the introvert, is we have met some absolutely incredible people with incredible stories, whether it's other boaters that are doing this trip kind of with us in the same kind of schedule, just people you meet at the docks or people you meet in these various cities that all have stories and just so much generosity in time and sharing with us and our family as we go around. It really has been about the people, and that really has surprised me as well.
What have some of your favorite encounters there been?
We just made it up to Washington, D.C., and I was prepared. I think the encounters that I enjoy the most are the ones that just take me by complete surprise. And it's when I think I stereotype people based on geography or the price of the slip at the yacht club where we're going to be. And I was just surprised again where it's an expensive place. It's called a yacht club, which already has like one strike against it. And it's in a pretentious kind of a place like Washington, D.C. But I was just completely wrong, 100% wrong. They could not have been friendlier at this place and invited us. Someone had just retired from the Coast Guard. Someone's dog had just died. He invited us aboard to celebrate those milestones. They don't know us from anybody. We just pulled in today and they said, come on aboard. We'd love to meet you and talk about your story and share a drink with you. And it was the same thing at the clubhouse at the yacht club. Just so many people walking up to us and welcoming us to the city, offering us tips for touring around, restaurant tips, just all of those things. And I was completely prepared for the opposite. I thought everybody would be standoffish. I thought there must be a lot of high security around there, so they probably don't like outsiders just tying up for a few days because there's senators and judges and politicians and other people that have their boats there, and so I would think they would be very guarded in sharing any of that, and they were completely the opposite. It was a very friendly, welcoming, awesome environment, and I've been surprised at that at a few of the different stops that we've had.
You were saying how everything is different each day. And what struck me there was you're doing this for a whole year. I remember traveling Europe for 3 weeks and at the end being so exhausted of just of not knowing what's going to happen next or where I was going to stay that night. So I guess the only thing you have in your favor is you don't have to change languages.
Right. Yes. Yeah. We don't have to change languages. So that is, you're right there. Each of the different kind of segments of this trip presents its own challenges. Coming down the rivers, it was all about the locks and navigating the locks and communicating with the locks. So you compete with barge traffic on the rivers, and you're always trying to coordinate, well, when can I get through? Because you don't want to show up there and they say, well, I got a barge, it's going to be like 6 hours, you're just going to have to idle right here. That's no fun for anybody. So there's some timing and navigation challenges on the rivers. There's some budget concerns in a lot of these, like in Florida or the Keys. You can't, or we can't on our budget, just stay in marinas every night. And so, that created issues or challenges with anchoring and finding anchorages and places to access some of the tourist destinations and fun things by dinghy so that we could keep some of our costs down, but still enjoy the places that we were. The Bahamas presented challenges in weather. So the weather predictions there are a little sketchier. We had long days that were more miles in open blue water than we had previously experienced, that were heavier seas than we would prefer. And so those were challenges. And what we learned early on in this trip is that if you overplan what you're doing, you're probably going to be more frustrated. And we have absolutely found that to be true. So we are planners by nature. We like to know what we're doing. If it's a 3-week Europe trip, we would have it all dialed down to the minute. Exactly, what are we going to see? What are we going to do? Where are we going to stay? And we tried that for the first couple of months in Michigan when we headed into the lake this last summer. And what we found was one bad weather day will cause you to have to make a dozen phone calls to reschedule every other thing that is now delayed that one day. And then it might happen to you again 2 days later, and you got another dozen phone calls to make, and it leads to a lot of frustration. And so what we found is that flying a little bit but more by the seat of our pants is a lot more comfortable and a lot less frustrating when we get out here. And so that's been a hard learned lesson, because it really doesn't feel comfortable or in in concert with just kind of how we normally would run our normal lives back home. We would normally plan every little thing out. And so I think that's one of the big lessons we take away from this trip, is that sometimes flying by the seat of your pants opens up new opportunities, gives you flexibility to do things that you probably wouldn't do otherwise. And so that's one that we've definitely learned.
So it has its definite upsides.
Yes, for sure.
What do you wish that you had known that you now know before you started your trip?
I think the mental health piece has been the one that has surprisingly affected us at times during the trip that we had not really planned for. We had planned a lot for many of the other aspects of the trip, but we had really only planned on one return trip home to Portland during this whole year. And we got that when the boat was hauled out to fix the hole in the side of it, and we spent some time back home. And I think we probably needed more of that home connection, more of that mental health piece of having either us flying home individually or collectively as a family, or we've had the occasion where grandma will fly out to the boat and stay and pamper the kids, and that's been awesome. It just gives everybody a boost when you have some of those connections from home to look forward to and to enjoy on the boat. But that's one thing I think, and I don't exactly know what the concrete to-dos would be if we had it to do over, but that is one area of focus I would definitely, if I were to advise someone embarking on this kind of a trip, would be, take care of it early and come up with some systems or escape hatches for that kind of thing. Like if you say, that's it, I've had enough, you can pull the string that says, this triggers a return home. Like it doesn't need to be today, but in the next week, in the next month, whatever it is, I need something as an escape hatch to be able to do, because I think sometimes we feel trapped and that we can't get off. We can't go and there's no real escape. So building in some, whether they're quarterly escape hatches where you're going to go home as a pre-planned, pre-predicted thing that you can just look forward to, or some way to trigger one of those while you're actually underway and realize that you're getting into trouble and just need to take a break.
Wow, I didn't even know that was a possibility. I just assumed that you were there for the duration. That was it. Is it hard to get back into the experience when you were gone while your boat was being fixed? It comes right back. It's interesting. I feel so that time we were very much looking forward to getting off the boat, getting home, doing that adventure as well. But then about halfway through that, we were really looking forward to getting back to the boat, and because at that point, so we're renting our house out. It's Airbnb. It happened to have a break in tenants right around that time, so we were actually able to stay in our own home. But it didn't exactly feel like home. It's Airbnb-ified. It's all white linens. It's all like, they moved the vase from this side of the thing to that side of the thing. They moved the carpets around and whatnot. And so it just didn't feel like home. And so about halfway through that process, it felt like the boat was home and that we were ready to get back to the boat. And but as far as getting back into the moving every other day and cruising around and things like that came back relatively quickly. I think we need a balance in this trip for sure. And what we've realized is that when we stay put in a place for a long time, we feel an itch to move. The boat was not designed to just sit at a dock forever. We feel an itch to move on to the next port and get on with the adventure. And when we're moving every day for a certain amount of days, we feel like it's too much.
we just need a couple of days downtime somewhere where we know we're going to be the same place every day. I spent some time in Norfolk, Virginia, where I was able to walk to the same coffee shop every morning, and that was super therapeutic. Just for like 4 days straight, wake up, walk to the coffee shop, and have some kind of routine time that is something that's kind of been lacking on the boat. And so, and then the same thing with being in a marina with social interaction versus being on anchor where there's just nobody around you. We need a balance of that too. And so our balance has been about 50-50. So those are our things. Some longer stays, some moving every day, some marinas, sometimes on kind of solitary anchor. And then the thing I would change is to build in some of those escape hatches to actually get off the boat as well.
What were you most hoping to find on this trip that you haven't found so far?
I thought there would be a big aha moment about what we might want to do in the future as far as a city that just we fell in love with, that we want to live there forever, or a boating lifestyle that we would want to embrace forever. And I think this trip has not revealed that. It's nudged us in certain directions regarding that. I don't think Jennifer and I, after the kids, we talk a lot about, well, we'll talk about the immediate first. So the immediate is we're going to finish this in August and we're going to move back to Portland. We've got the boat already listed with our broker, and it'll be sold in August, and we're going to move back. That's important for the kids to finish out high school and have their friend groups and things like that. So that's the immediate. But I would go around again immediately. I would just keep on boating.
Really?
Yeah. And our daughter would do the same. And that,
wow.
And that's an interesting divide because she and I are the introverts of the family. But our extroverts, who you would think would love to hit a new dock and go meet any person and chat up, whatever, have struggled the most. And I think it's because their friend groups are not here, and they really just, yes, they can make friends with anybody, but they really want their friends that they've already made and that are in Portland. And so anyway, two of us would go around again. Two of us really need to get back to Portland. And so, and the deal was one year trip. And so we're honoring that deal, and we're doing that according to plan. So that's this year. And then we've talked about, what does the future hold? We're going to wait until the kids have graduated high school. And then Jennifer and I, we've talked about going around again, buying another boat, doing the trip again. There's just so much to see that you really have this FOMO of you can't see it all in this 1 year. You can see a lot of it, but you really can't immerse yourself every single place you go. And some places you want to spend more time, and some places, unfortunately, you just have to skip over and want to come back to someday. And so I think we will do that. But we haven't found like the one city where like, oh my gosh, this is definitely the place. We want to put down roots here and, sell our house in Portland and come here, and this is where we're going to live. We've realized that it is pretty amazing to have summer in Michigan in the north and winter in Florida in the south. That weather-wise has been an incredible year and eye-opening for where we're used to this Pacific Northwest gray drizzle in the winter. I'm not looking forward to going back to that in the fall for sure. So knowing that this is out here and accessible, and that there's year-long boating available, like who knew? I'm excited to have learned that. And so, but no, we haven't had a big revelation on this trip of a city calling our name, which is kind of a little bit what we thought might happen.
Now, so you're selling your boat in Michigan?
Yes.
What if you wanted to actually bring your boat home? Could you do it on water? And how would you do that?
Yeah. So from Michigan, you could do one of two routes. You can go back down the rivers, like we went down the Mississippi River and pop out in the Gulf of Mexico, and then go south into the Panama Canal, and then cut over and then up the west coast of Central America, Mexico to the west coast. Or the least expensive and probably more prudent is to get the boat to Fort Lauderdale, and they put it on a bigger boat, and then they ship it through the Panama Canal, and it gets dropped off in Mexico or Canada, like Vancouver Island, Canada, and then you can pick up your boat there and then cruise on the West Coast. And so it's a possibility. It's not really the boat for the Pacific Northwest, though. It's I think there's a boat for every job, and there are some amazing, beautiful, perfect for the Pacific Northwest boats. This probably just isn't it, and it's certainly too big and fancy for a weekender. So as we look to move back to our home, there'll probably be a boat in our future there, but this is too much boat for that kind of thing. And so we'll look for something smaller than this, but that we can still cruise around and enjoy the waters in all four seasons. And there's been some talk of, the next adventure 2.0. I'm eyeing, departing Portland down the Columbia River and go explore Puget Sound for a while, the San Juan Islands, the Inside Passage to Alaska. We've got some really amazing, beautiful cruising grounds in our backyard up there. And I feel like with the experience that we've had on this trip, we're a little saltier than we were when we started. And I feel like we can handle some of those bigger waters and have some of the skills that we would need to take on a trip like that. So that may be in our future as well. Again, not so sure on the timing of it, but it is, unless it's the absolute, your dream boat, perfect boat for you, getting it from the East Coast to the West Coast is kind of prohibitively expensive, unless you're really up for a big adventure and sailing it yourself through the Panama Canal.
How treacherous is that?
Pretty treacherous. Well, the canal itself is not. It's the getting to it. It's a lot of that open Gulf of Mexico type of cruising, and then the Pacific Ocean is pretty notoriously poor conditions with not a ton of kind of cruiser-friendly ports to just hop into every place. So what we're finding here on the East Coast is, every 20 or 30 miles is a cute little town where you can go in there and tie up and go have a sandwich or whatever. On the West Coast, things are a little more spread out and a lot more industrial, and so there's not a lot of little cool marinas and towns to pop into to get out of weather here and there. So, but I don't know, that may be something in the future.
Pulling into Long Beach.
Exactly, right. Yeah. So where do I tie up, guys? Yeah.
You mentioned going up to Alaska, San Juan. Are there any other loops, like popular loops like this one that you've done? I mean, it sounds like Alaska would be like go there and then come back.
Right. Not really. So there are some kind of add-ons to this loop that we're on. Like you can go up into Canada. It's called the Triangle Loop or the Down East Loop. Are portions where you can go up and kind of come down the Atlantic side from Canada past Maine and then hit these same kind of Hudson River, Erie Canal kinds of things. So there's options in and through that section to add a separate loop to this loop, but there's no real other big loop that I am aware of that people do, and there's certainly not a route that is as well, I think, advertised and organized. The Great Loop Cruisers Association, that is the nonprofit that puts this all kind of together and hosts conferences on this and provides us our map and planning resources and all these things. They just do an amazing job at educating and making sure that we're safe out here. And there's harbor hosts in all these towns that can take care of you if you need help. I don't know of any other area that you can cruise and have the type of support that you have on this particular loop. I'm looking for resources on that trip to Alaska on the Inside Passage. I know a fair number of cruisers do it, but I don't know of, again, like the one resource that like this is the book you have to have. Everybody uses this book. This is what you do. And then the other one that comes up somewhat often is the Mediterranean. People will buy a boat or rent a boat or do some charters and do some loop around the Mediterranean Sea. And I don't know if that's the kind of thing that would be maybe in our future as well, but yeah, certainly, uh, yeah, certainly an option.
So of your whole trip where you were on the like traveling by boat, not back home, how many nights have you not spent on the boat?
Really, just one or two, and it was not. It was adjacent to that trip home. So we arrived, the boat got
Okay.
hauled out of the water, and we had some viewers from our YouTube channel that had a condo right there in Orange Beach, Alabama, and they said, "Hey,
Wow.
would you like to stay in our condo?" And we said, "Actually, we really need a place to stay because our boat's going to get hauled out of the water." And they said very generously that we could stay there, and so we did. But aside from that, we have not been off the boat for a single night's sleep, and that was the very first time, yeah, and really the only time our heads were not in hitting the pillows in these beds on the boat for this year. So just that one chunk of time back in November when we did that, and so far our plans are the same for the rest of this trip. Is we'll finish it out having not spend a night off the boat until we move back home.
Amazing. I was thinking this morning, I thought, I have no idea what you've been up to.
Yep.
And then it dawned on me, I was like, wait a minute, you have that YouTube channel. I could have been watching. I don't really subscribe to anything on YouTube and try not to go there very often.
Yep.
So have you kept your YouTube channel updated along the way?
We have. It has been really hard to keep it updated, and we know of a couple of other YouTubers that have taken a step back because it is an exceedingly difficult thing to do. It's so much work just to do the trip, to navigate, to check the weather, to get marinas, to figure out what you're doing, and just survive, fix the boat in different places. Everything is a little more challenging than it is on land. So to add anything else to it is that much more difficult. And so we have continued to do the videos. It has been a struggle sometimes. We try to post them about a month behind so that mostly so that creepers don't find us and kidnap our children, things like that. But also, gives me some.
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, but also gives me some flexibility in queuing up a few, so that the production schedule isn't so strict that I feel like I need to not do something really cool and fun so that I can just get a video out on a Friday. But with one exception, we've kept up every Friday. We post a video, and usually about a month behind real time. We've let it slip a little bit, so maybe we're about 6 or 8 weeks behind real time right now. But we're currently posting our Bahamas videos, which are just incredible. But
and that's On Fire Family, is that right?
Yeah, onfirefamily.com is the website, and you can get to it from that, or just search On Fire Family, all one word, on YouTube, and you'll find us.
I got a couple other questions here, though. You mentioned boat fixes. Besides getting the hole in the side of your boat fixed, like what are typical things that you fix, and then what are the ones that are like, oh, not that?
So the typical are the maintenance items. So an oil change is a big deal. It's not like you pull into Jiffy Lube and it's done and you drive home. There's a lot of logistics about it. So I got to get special oil filters for the diesel motors on the boat, and so I have to source those from like a marine dealer. Sometimes they're on Amazon, sometimes not. Then I have to get them to wherever I am. So some marinas are good about receiving Amazon packages and then holding them for you if you're coming there, and others are not. They're like, I don't know this guy, send it back. Or, oh, Amazon says it was delivered, but then you look around and it's just nowhere to be found and it's just gone. So there's that. There's oil is available almost everywhere, but the volume of oil that this boat takes is 6 gallons per diesel engine, plus the generator is another gallon. So we're dealing with 13 gallons of oil to do an oil change. Plus, I have to get rid of the spent oil to have it recycled at the end. And so that's just a lot of weight and size of stuff. So I can't carry all the oil I need for the next oil change now. I have to wait till it's due. And then and like 13 gallons of oil is a lot of oil to like pack in an Uber and get back to a boat. And they're usually a little sketched out when you show up. So those are the kinds of normal things. And we have
How often do you do that?
That's about every 3 months. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you're going to do it 4 times.
Yeah. Yep. And then the ones, and we've been very, very blessed with this boat not having major mechanical breakdowns. And that's not certainly guaranteed, and it's not the case for a lot of boats that will do this trip. And so we've been very thankful. And I've also been thankful that I have been gifted with the ability to fix a lot of things on my own, because if you count on finding the guy that knows how to fix that thing in that city on the weekend that it broke where you happen to be, it leads to a lot of frustration and delays and things.
I'm interrupting the recorded conversation here to let you all know that at this part of the conversation, for some reason, Seth's recording got really garbled. So the short summary on what he's describing here is that some part of the exhaust system made out of cast iron that had salt water running through it for 20 years or more was slowly corroding and started to gradually leak, which he discovered during his daily inspections. And so that was one of the largest, heaviest, most complicated things that had to get repaired during their trip.
It has that specialized thing that you need, and so you get all the things lined up, and you hope you accounted for it all. And that was the biggest job, and it went well. But we're seeking a lot of different kind of expert advice and doing a lot of research to make sure that we can pull it off and not be just completely stuck. Because if you disassemble it, then you have a broken boat and you're stuck wherever you are. So so that was probably the biggest one.
Wow. And how about your finances in terms of what you've planned and budgeted versus what's happened?
Yeah, we're probably 50% over budget, and we're budgeters. That's not a thing that really.
That was like, whoa.
Yeah, that's not a thing that happens to us, but it has happened on this trip. And I can attribute it to a few different things. One, at the beginning, absolutely, it was that we were living like we were on vacation. And so when you're on vacation, you dine out and you live the good life and you enjoy. And we treated the first couple of months like that until we started adding it up, and we're like, whoa, yeah, we can't do a whole year like this. It's that's way over budget, and we're not really enjoying a lot of the experiences. So we started eating on the boat quite a bit more, and that helped. And then the other was marinas versus anchoring out. So marinas are expensive, and sometimes you don't really even enjoy the amenities of a marina because you pull in late at night and you're going to leave early in the morning. And did you really get to enjoy the clubhouse or the pool or the whatever? Some marinas are as fancy as could be and have a tiki bar next to a pool overlooking the water and all the things, and some are just a bare bones wooden dock that you can tie to. So marinas, and then diesel fuel. It's just going to be what it's going to be, is what I've found. We'll seek out cheaper fill-ups that we can, but essentially there's not a lot of budget shopping for that. The way we kind of mitigate our diesel cost is by going slow. So when we had talked, I think in June, we had planned on going 10 miles an hour, and at that burn rate, you burn twice as much diesel fuel as when you would go 8 miles an hour.
Oh.
So we dropped our kind of average cruise speed from 10 miles an hour to 8 miles an hour a couple of months into the trip to reduce that, because diesel prices were insane when we started. They've come down quite a bit. They were insane when we started, and so that has helped a lot. But man, those first few days running 8 miles an hour instead of 10, it just felt like you were almost going backwards. Like you just couldn't. It just like I can't even see the trees going by outside. Like, are we even moving? But in this trip, generally, you're not in a hurry, and I think we see things and do things and experiencing things at 8 miles an hour that you wouldn't do if you were going, 15 or 20 miles an hour. So some boats or budgets allow, they'll do faster like that. But what I've found is that two things. Number one, if you hit something, it does a lot more damage if you're going 20 miles an hour instead of 8 miles an hour. And so those are the guys. And your decision making has to be a lot quicker, right? So if you see the rocks coming up, I can see them coming quite a ways off at 8 miles an hour. At 20, maybe not as much. And so I've just experienced people going faster tend to have a lot more repairs. So that's one. And then the other is we're going to end up at the same Tiki Hut happy hour, whether I go 8 miles an hour or you go 20. You might just end up there early and have a nap or something beforehand, but we're going to make it, and it's going to be just fine. And we make those calculated decisions as we've gone. So it's not like it's just completely gotten away from us blindly. We could have skipped the Bahamas. It's an expensive side trip. It's a lot of fuel to get down there and to do all of those things. But we were at the, we were heading up the coast of Florida. You can either take a right and go to the Bahamas or keep on going. And we made that decision to do it because it is a kind of a bucket list trip and an epic thing. And when are we ever going to be in the same position to be able to do this? And so we've made some of those choices, but it has been more expensive than we had predicted for sure.
Well, any closing thoughts, highlights, challenges to people listening, recommendations, whatever's on your mind?
Yeah, I would say whatever it is, whatever your great loop is that you may have been dreaming of or curious about, I would just, my encouragement would be to figure out what it takes to make it happen and start putting some concrete steps in place to move towards that. I just had my best friend pass away this last month. And he was in his early 50s, and he had, dreams like we all kind of do, right? And it just really secured in my mind that this is the right time and place for us to be doing this trip in the life of our family. I think we've talked before about me being a cancer survivor and some of my health issues in the past. And health is not guaranteed. And my message, I guess, is that figure out a way to do it sooner than later. Start working towards those dreams and make them happen, because you don't know how many days you have on this earth. And to be out here actually doing this, when my friend passed away, it just really hit me that he had a lot of those kinds of things still left in him when he passed, and maybe don't wait. Maybe get out there sooner.
All right, and people can find you once more time at
onfirefamily.com is our website, and you'll find all of our social media accounts there, but most importantly, the link to our YouTube channel, which is also titled On Fire Family, and we post videos there every week on this grand adventure, and I'm sure it'll morph into something else, and you can learn about whatever that is when we're done with our trip over there on the YouTube.
All right, thanks again.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for listening to The John Polster Show. Notes, links, and all that other good stuff for this episode are at johnpolster.com/podcast. Send your questions, ideas, or a simple hello to podcast@johnpolster.com. Want to stay up to date on new episodes and receive notifications of upcoming events? Register your email address at johnpolster.com/updates.